ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaskar, my dear friends. In this video, I am going to talk about knowledge of the self. The infinite and eternal truth, Brahma, pervades the whole universe, the visible and invisible. If the visible be taken away, if the perceptible phenomena be destroyed, that which will be left is the infinite. May we realize the infinite in this life. May we attain to that truth and enjoy peace forever. Peace, peace, peace to all living creatures. This is from Isha Upanishad. Now, knowledge of the self. The knowledge of God is not so commonly spoken of in India as the knowledge of the true self. Self knowledge reveals the knowledge of the real nature of the Absolute and of the Supreme Deity. Naturally, we use the word self in the sense of ego, but the term self knowledge does not mean mere knowledge of the ego. The ego in us is the actor, thinker, and perceiver, that which performs all the functions of the body and mind is generally known as I or ego, but it is only the reflection of the absolute Brahma, which is the source of all intelligence. The ego is the image of that divine spark within us which gives it vitality and makes it do all works, mental and physical. So, when we speak of self knowledge, we do not mean simply the knowledge of the lower animal self or ego, but also of the higher self. The higher self is the same as the absolute which lies at the foundation of the phenomenal universe. The absolute substance or Brahma is beyond space and time. Consequently, it is formless and unchangeable. When it manifests itself as an individualized, self conscious entity, it is known as the ego. It also appears as the object of consciousness, then it is called matter. The absolute being, however, is neither matter nor is it the same as ego. It forms the background of our ego, therefore, it is our true self. When we have realized it, we have known God as well as the relation which the phenomenal universe bears to Him. And the best method of becoming conscious of this absolute being is through the realization of our true self or Atman as it is called in Sanskrit. Some people think that self-annihilation is the ideal of the Vedanta philosophy, but it is not so. The true self, according to Vedanta, can never be destroyed. If self annihilation were the ideal, then the self would be subject to change and destruction. It could not be the same as the absolute being. The Vedanta philosophy, on the contrary, teaches that the true self is absolutely indestructible and unchangeable. How is it then possible for anyone to think of its annihilation? Destruction of self is just as impossible as the destruction of the absolute. Therefore, self annihilation cannot be the highest aim and ideal of life. Self knowledge alone helps us to realize the absolute truth and to attain perfection. It is considered to be the highest wisdom. When Socrates asked the Delphian oracle, "What is the highest knowledge?" the answer came, "Know thyself." By the word self here is meant not merely the ego but the true self. The same knowledge of the real self has been glorified in India from the most ancient Vedic period. Vedanta, the rationalistic portion of the Vedas, describes this self knowledge as the highest ideal of life. If we wish to know God, we must first know our true self. We must ask within ourselves who and what we are in reality. When we have come from, where we have come from, and what becomes of us after death. These questions are of vital importance. Ordinary people cannot solve such problems. Their minds are too busy with the affairs of the phenomenal world, but an earnest seeker after truth who is discontented with the knowledge of material objects wishes to go below the surface of phenomenal appearances and does not stop until the ultimate goal, the reality which underlies all phenomena, is discovered. His aim is to find the correct solution of these problems by knowing the true nature of his ego as well as of the universe. He may start with the objective world, but gradually, as he advances step by step and reaches further and farther in his search after truth, he comes back in the end to his own self, because the true self is the center of the universe. The phenomenal world, which consists of the objects of sense perception, may be compared to a grand circle, the circumference of which lies in the gross material forms, and the innermost center of which is Atma, the true self. The nature of this true self, according to Vedanta, is infinite. It is neither limited by time nor conditioned by space relations. The scriptures describe God as the center of the universe, but Vedanta says that Self or Atma is also the center of the universe and that the true self is one with divinity. The moment that we realize the divine self within us, we understand that the realm of the same Atma extends to the sun, moon, stars, and even to the most distant planets, the light from which takes hundreds and thousands of years to reach us. Wherever there is existence, whether on the physical or mental plane, there is also the manifestation of this divine self, that by which we know the existence of the external world, by which we are conscious of our bodies, senses, and mental powers, is our true self. It is not far from us yet. It is beyond the reach of mind and intellect. The self is thus described in the fourth verse of the Isa Upanishad. It, the self, is beyond all vibration and motion. It is one and swifter than mind. The senses never reached it, it transcended them all. Though standing still, it overtakes the mind and senses which are running fast. It is the source of all mental activities, sense powers, and the various forces of nature. Modern science tells us that the whole world is the product of matter and material forces. Matter, again, as we have seen in the first chapter, is nothing but a certain state of motion or vibration of some substance, the true nature of which is unknown and unknowable. Every particle of the universe is in constant motion or vibration. That which we call heat or light, sound or taste, odor, touch, or any object of sense perception is nothing but a state of vibration of the same unknown substance. Sir William Crookes says at 32 vibrations per second is it shown that we have the first beginning of audible sound, and that sound ceases to be audible when it reaches to something less than 33,000 vibrations in a second. The vibrations of heat and light rays are almost inconceivable more rapid. They are expressed in no fewer than 15 figures, whilst the vibrations within a single second of the recently discovered radium are expressed in more than 9 millions of millions. The whole world consists in the vibration of atoms or the most minute particles of material substance, but above and beyond all this vibration, there exists the absolute reality, the true self, which is the source of knowledge, intelligence, and consciousness. It is through this self that we know that there is such a thing as vibration. Here the question rises, who is it that knows that the world is a mass of vibration? Does vibration know itself? It cannot. Motion produces nothing but motion. This is one of the laws of nature which has been confirmed by modern scientists. Motion cannot produce knowledge. Knowledge is something which is not the effect of motion or vibration, but it is that which enlightens our minds and makes us see and understand that there is such a thing as motion or vibration. Therefore, the Upanishad says that which does not vibration, that which does not vibrate is our true self. Search within and see where is that which does not vibrate, but which is the knower of all vibrations and actions. It goes faster than mind. We know that mind is the fastest thing in the world, though travels faster than electricity or any other current that exists on the physical plane. Sir William Crookes reasons that the though vibrations which issue from the brain may really have their beginning at a point where it becomes no longer possible to estimate the vibrations which are caused by the most subtle forces of physical nature. Furthermore, he adds, if we can anyway realize the concept of a force which is capable of creating thousands of trillions of vibrations in a second, and if we add to this idea that the velocity of these vibrations is equaled by their rapidity, we see easily enough that thought may put a girdle about the earth in an infinitesimal fraction of time. We can exchange messages by wireless telegraphy between here and England or any other part of the world, but thought transference is quicker than wireless telegraphy. The mind of a person who is sitting here can go straight into the sun or beyond the sun into the infinite space where the ordinary force of electricity will not reach. Perhaps even there the mind can run in the shortest interval of time. Time exists in mind. What is time? Time means succession in thought. When one thought rises after another, the interval between them is what we call time. So it is subject to mental activity. That which is swifter than mind is the true self. Our real self can go quicker than thought current and even where mind cannot reach. It travels everywhere. Self or Atma forms the background of the mind. Therefore, the self is quicker and faster than the activity of the mind. Mind can go nowhere without depending upon the self, the knower. It remains absolutely inactive when it is separated from the self. The senses never reached it, it transcended them all. The senses cannot reveal it, sense powers cannot express the true nature of the self because they are limited by time and space, while the knower of time and space must necessarily be beyond the reach of the senses. When we see the sun, the very sight depends upon self consciousness. That is, we must be conscious of the fact that we are seeing something and that consciousness must depend upon our true self. The sun will not be seen if our mind and eyes are separated and cut off from self, the source of knowledge, intelligence, and consciousness. Depending upon that source of consciousness and intelligence, our mind works, our senses perform their functions, and the body moves. Therefore, the Isha Upanishad continues, it self moves and it moves not. It is far and likewise near. It is inside and also outside of all this. When the body moves, the source of intelligence or our true self appears as moving, but in reality it does not move. Where will it go? It cannot go anywhere. When we move a jar from one place to another, the space within the jar appears to be moving, but does the space move in reality? No. What is it then that moves? We do not know. The form appears to be moving, but the form again is limitation in space. It may be said if space does not move, then the form cannot move. It seems to be like a puzzle. When we try to answer it at every step, we meet with insoluble problems. The whole of life is a mystery. We endeavor to find some explanation by studying nature, but nature puts us into more confusion. Science does not help us. She takes us up to a certain point and therefore she leaves us without showing anything beyond, without telling us what to do and where to go. Such is the condition of our relative knowledge. When properly analyzed, it appears to be a partial expression of the absolute knowledge, which is the real nature of the true self. Relative knowledge, however, will not help us in solving the riddles of the universe. If we wish to know the ultimate truth of the world, we must go beyond nature and seek the and seek the explanation in the realm of the absolute. Nature is called in Sanskrit Maya. She deludes us, yet we are living in nature, and our body, senses, and mind are parts of nature. The more we study nature, the more we are deluded. We do not come to any final solution. Scientists have arrived at certain conclusions which are like conclusions in which nothing is concluded. Science tells us that the ultimate goal of everything is unknown and unknowable. Here, Vedanta comes and advises its students to study not merely nature but our self or Atma. Then all confusion will be removed and the absolute truth will be reached. Nature makes us see that the self moves when the body is in motion, but in reality, the self is immovable. Nature makes us feel that self is very far from us, but it is the nearest thing that we have, nearer than this body and mind, which we consider to be the nearest. Our true self, however, is in reality the nearest of all. It dwells in everything as its soul or inner nature, yet it is outside of everything. How can that be? If it dwells inside, how can it dwell outside? Space exists inside as well as outside. Take the space within this room, which is confined by its walls. This space appears as inside the room, but what are the walls? Are they separate from space? No, they exist in and through space. They are nothing but space. The space of the walls limits the space that is inside the room. But does it limit in reality? No, it is outside also. Can we limit the infinite space? By no means. Similarly, if we try to limit ourselves by our mind, we fail because mind is not large and strong enough to keep the self out. Sense powers cannot limit it. Physical forms can never divide it because each one of these exists as related to the self. The self or Atma, when properly realized, appears as unlimited and infinite. We say that we are finite beings, but in reality, we are not finite. There is only one infinite existence which expresses itself through finite forms. as finite forms existing in space cannot live outside of it, so all these various individuals live in and through that infinite space of reality which is called the Absolute Self. He who realizes all beings in the Self and the Self in all animate and inanimate objects of the universe never hates anything or any being. Hatred proceeds from imperfect relative knowledge, which makes us perceive objects as separate from one another. But when we see our true self in others, how can we hate another without hating our own self? It would be impossible for self to hate self, as it is impossible to hate our true self, so it would be impossible to hate the self of any being. This is one of the results of self knowledge. Where self knowledge is, there can remain no feeling of hatred. When hatred is gone, jealousy and all other selfish feelings, which we call wicked, disappear. What remains? The ordinary love, which stands in opposition to hatred, vanishes, but divine love begins to reign in the heart of the seer. True love means the expression of oneness, as love for body makes us feel one with the body, so love for the true self makes us feel one with the true self. And if we see that self in others, we cannot help loving them as we love ourselves. Now we understand the meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself. It is not an extraordinary teaching. Vedanta has always taught this truth. People of the Western world say that Christ was the only one who ever taught in this way, but they do not know that this is the very foundation of the ethics of Vedanta. Love means the expression of oneness in thought, word, and deed, where all beings have become one with the Self. What delusion, what sorrow can there be to him who has once realized this unity? Self knowledge leads to realization of oneness with all beings. When all beings appear as parts of one universal self, there is neither delusion nor fear nor sorrow, because there can exist no other thing outside the self or Atma for which one can grieve or from which one can suffer. Sorrow and fear arise so long as there is the sense of duality or multiplicity. If all objects of fear and sorrow become one with the all pervading divine self, then fear and sorrow must vanish. But so long as we think of other beings which exist outside of ourselves, we cannot avoid grief and suffering which arise on their account. In absolute oneness, however, There cannot remain fear, sorrow, suffering, separation, or self delusion. This is another result of self knowledge. Some people may think that Vedanta teaches us to be selfish, but this is far from true. The self becomes dead, the lower self vanishes, and with its disappearance, all selfishness is destroyed. The word self must not be taken for lower self or selfishness. It stands for Atma, the higher self, which is our divine nature. There is no other expression in English by which we can convey the real meaning of Atma. We shall avoid confusion, therefore, if we use the Sanskrit word Atma to express our true self, then no one will mistake it for selfishness. The Atma has pervaded all effulgent, incorporeal, scathless, untouched by brain or nerve centers, pure, sinless, a poet, kavi, wise, omnipresent, self-existent. He has disposed all things aright for eternity. The Atma Self, who is the center of the universe, is all pervading. Wherever our mind goes, the Atma goes there. It is the source of the light of intelligence. It is pure, spotless, sinless. Here you will notice that Vedanta teaches that we are not born in sin and iniquity, but that our Atma or true self is sinless. By this, it does not encourage us to do sinful acts, but it tells us that the moment one acquires self knowledge, from that moment one ceases to do anything wicked. The Atma is in the body, but it has no body. It is formless, that is, beyond gross and subtle forms. There are forms which we cannot see except through the most powerful microscope. Even such minutest forms do not affect the self. It is absolutely beyond all forms, but at the same time, it can appear in any form, and all forms exist in it. Atma is beyond all nervous activity or the function of the brain. The materialists maintain that when brain and nerve centers vibrate, self consciousness is produced. But Vedanta contradicts their statement by saying, beyond the reach of nerve centers and untouched by brain powers, it is not affected by the change of the body. There may be variations in the color or form of the physical body, or the body may be diseased or have some part mutilated, but that disease or mutilation will not produce any change in the true self or Atman. Therefore, self knowledge makes one free from nervousness and other physical ailments. The word kavi means poet and also means the seer of things. Self is described as the greatest poet of the universe. This is one of the most beautiful expressions and attributes that can be given to divinity. He is the poet. His poetry is the universe. He is also described as the greatest artist. His art we see in the sunrise and sunset. The sun, moon, and stars are nothing but the paintings on infinite space by the hand of the Almighty Artist. True self or Atma is above good and evil, beyond virtue and vice. Some people ask how can it be above good and evil? Others say it is only good. Good and evil, however, are two relative terms. Evil exists in relation to good, and we cannot separate the one from the other. If we wish to take good, we shall have to take evil also. So, with virtue and vice, one cannot exist without being related to the other. The absolute self is above all relativity, therefore, it is above good and evil, beyond virtue and vice. There is no other seer than this Atma, no other knower. There is one eternal knower who knows the existence of all objects, and the knower in us is only a part of that eternal knower or God. The vast majority of mankind do not know this great truth. The preachers do not teach it because they themselves do not understand it. If God is the knower of all, then the knower in us is a part of God. Vedanta tells us to realize the individual knower first, then will the knower of the universe be known. The Atma or true self is never the object of knowledge, but it is always the subject. The cosmic or universal knower is the same as that which people worship as God. Thus, by the light of Vedanta, we can see God close to our souls. But in the scriptures of special religions, He is made remote, He is driven far out of our reach. Vedanta brings Him nearer than anything we possess. Although this Atma is all pervading, yet it is beyond everything. It dwells in all things, still, it is not the same as anything. It is never affected by phenomenal conditions. It transcends the changes of nature, yet it permeates nature. It is its own cause. In it, cause and effect are identical. The Atma has no cause, yet it is the cause of all, and at the same time, it is beyond the law of cause and effect. The self has existed by itself from the beginningless past and will continue to exist throughout eternity. No one can see its beginning or its end because beginning and end refer to time and our search after them. Being within the sphere of mental activity is also subject to time. We may search for the beginning and end of the phenomenal universe, but as the Atma self is above all thought and beyond time and space, it can have neither end nor beginning. It is all knowing. All relative knowledge is only a partial expression of that wisdom which constitutes the nature of the Atma. Now we see that the attributes which people generally give to God, such as He is omniscient, omnipotent, all pervading, eternal, infinite, are also given by Vedanta to the Atma or true self. True self is the soul of our souls. Self knowledge reveals that the attributes of God are also the attributes of the Atma. Those who do not realize this true self dwell in the darkness of ignorance and go through the misery and sufferings which exist in that darkness. They are always fearful and unhappy. They fear death and everything that threatens their earthly existence, and they make their life miserable by attaching themselves to a particular form of manifestation which they are afraid of losing. They love sense enjoyments and worldly pleasures. They feel disappointed and discontented if they do not find these, and they consider that this earthly life has no other higher aim or ideal. The life of such persons is nothing but a continuous chain of fear and unhappiness. Those who are rich fear loss of fortune. Those who have reputation and high position are afraid of losing them, while every man or woman suffers from the fear of disease and death. Do you suppose that these people will ever enjoy true happiness on this earth? No. They alone are truly happy who have become absolutely free from fear. Perfect happiness comes and all fear is conquered when self knowledge is gained. For this reason, each one of us ought to make constant efforts to acquire it in this life. The light of self knowledge dispels the darkness of ignorance and frees us from fear, sorrow, misery, birth and death, as also from bondage, imperfection, and delusion, which proceed from ignorance. This ignorance is likewise the mother of selfishness. It has the power to veil the divine and absolute Atma and to make us identify our true self with the material body. Thus, when forced by the inscrutable power of ignorance, avidya, we forget our real self, think of ourselves as the sons or daughters of mortals. We become finite and subject to such limitations as are understood by the term selfishness. Self knowledge destroys ignorance and makes one absolutely unselfish. Blessed is the blessed is he who lives in the sunshine of self-knowledge, having risen above the clouds of fear and selfishness which gather in the night of ignorance. What is this world? It is produced by ignorance and bound by fear. Knowledge of the self destroys all worldliness, brings spiritual strength, and makes one fearless as God is fearless. Does he fear anything? One can he. The moment we realize that God dwells in us, how can we fear? How can we have fear of death when we know that death merely means a change from one body into another and that our true self, our Atma, is unchangeable? Those who do not possess self knowledge are miserable and will be born again and again on this plane of ignorance until they have learned to realize their true self. Self knowledge is the only source of happiness. It will lead to perfection and freedom. You may seek freedom, but how can you obtain it when you have become a slave of fear and earthly conditions? You are a part of divinity. Feel it, realize it, and all these ties will drop away and you will be free. The attainment of this freedom through self knowledge will bring to you the realization of your oneness with divinity. Then you will be able to say, that light which I see in the sun is in me, and that which is in me is in the sun. I am the Lord of body, senses, and mind, and I am also the Lord of all phenomenal objects. I am the light of the universe. Through me shine the sun, moon, stars, and the lightning. I have realized my true self. I have realized the true self of the universe, and therefore I am one with the Absolute. Maybe may my speech be established in my mind. May my mind be fixed in my speech. O divine word, thou hast manifested thyself in the form of wisdom. Do thou spread thy powers through my words. Do not deprive me of the truth. May I always dwell in the truth. My salutations to thy fire of wisdom, to thy seers of truth, and to the Devas, bright spirits. O divine word, be propitious to us. Stay in our spiritual space and be happy. Like the Lord of Light, the Sun, constantly purify our hearts and reveal to our eyes that which is auspicious for us. Do not leave us. Peace, peace, peace to all living creatures. Kostiki Upanishad. So I conclude this video at this stage. Next video will start with the topic prana and the self. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar, my dear friends. Thank you.